Ed and Janet Cox right here on Reality Radio 101. To contact us live right now, send us an email. Our email address is liquidgreenhealthshow@gmail.com. And now, ladies and gentlemen, right to your hosts of the Liquid Green Health Show, Fred and Janet Cox.
And good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It's Sunday, July the 2nd, and it's a big celebration here in Canada, all over Canada. We are in a celebration mode, right? And because we had our birthday when?
You mean, so what we want to say is we hope everybody is.
No, I'm going to say that. I'm going to say that.
Canada Day weekend.
Yeah.
And yesterday was the official Canada Day.
Right. So that's what I was asking you. Why are we celebrating?
What do you mean? For Canada's birthday?
Yeah. Happy birthday to all our Canadian listeners this afternoon.
You know what I thought you were referring to?
No.
The birthday we went to, the 1-year-old birthday we went to yesterday.
No, I wasn't.
That's what I thought you meant, birthday. Okay.
I was referring to the official.
I'm a slow learner today.
I was referring to the official Canada Day yesterday. That was
birth of a nation.
Birth of a nation. And the entire weekend, it's a long weekend here in Canada, and we're celebrating our 152 years, right? Something along that line.
Yeah.
What is it like to live for that long?
Well, pretty soon with AI, we're going to be able to find out.
Yeah, I would.
People are already living 120.
Okay.
I don't know what the record is, but AI is going to help us get there.
Yeah. Anyway, lots, and lots of things are happening this weekend. Everything from boat cruises to barbecue to parties and you name it, it's happening. Summer has begun, folks. Summer starts in Canada.
And guess what? For our US listeners, in just a few days, they're going to be going through the same thing, right?
The big four for you
July
guys. So
4th.
your turn is coming.
So we won't have the show. Their holiday would have already passed.
Yeah.
Right?
So let's wish them an early, July 4th. Right. But right now in Toronto, this is where it's all happening. If you've never been to Toronto, this is a perfect time to come see all the festivities that's happening. Enjoy some of the wonderful cultural food that's available all across the city. It truly is a multicultural city, Toronto. So with that, good afternoon to all our listeners and viewers across Canada, United States, and around the world. We are the Coxes, and thank you for allowing us into your private space. You were about to say something.
I was about to say, let's make a toast.
Oh, yeah.
Happy Canada Day.
Happy Canada Day, right?
Once again, I
wish you all the best, love, peace, joy, happiness, contentment, prosperity, whatever it is.
Yes.
Here it is. Welcome to the Liquid Green Health Show, folks. Every Sunday, as we do, like right now, we're having fun on air. We're offering tips in an edutainment format designed to stimulate the mind, stimulate your soul, and help to bring you one step closer to living a healthier lifestyle. All of our shows are rebroadcast on Spotify. It's also on YouTube, so you can go either or, whichever you want to go to. Just type in Liquid Green Health Show. You're going to pop up. You're going to hear us. You're going to see us, like us, press that subscribe button, do whatever is necessary, because we want to hear from you. Leave a comment. You wanted to say something about the comments.
I have a question for Mike. Mike, I just thought of this. If we ask folks to go to Facebook, we're not live stream on Facebook, correct?
No, we can put a link on it like we've been doing in the past.
Okay.
I can do that right now.
Okay, that would be nice.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Because what we want to do, like we're starting our big campaign, and we're going to be talking about that for sure next week. And we're for the shows, Frederick. What I was thinking, we get emails, and emails are wonderful, but because we've had so many people write in and say, not just that they enjoy the show, but that it has actually made a difference.
Yes.
They have taken some of the suggestions, some of the information that has been shared, and they've made changes within their own lives for the better in terms of health, right? And I think that's a good thing. And sometimes it's the conversation. If we want to extend that conversation, what's a better platform than, leaving the comment on YouTube or going to Facebook and starting a conversation? So, for example, today's show, once we're done, I'm going to ask folks, if you want to say something, you send in the emails, redirect those thoughts to either our Facebook account or, which is Liquid Green, you're going to tell it, right?
liquidgreenproducts.com.
Or on the YouTube.
Liquid Green Products Inc. That's
Okay.
Facebook.
Okay. And then let's get the conversation started on some of these social media. Because, whenever I go to any of those, anything I read, I usually like to check the comments. Sometimes the comments are more interesting than the shows, so we're going to be doing that, right? We're going to ask people to leave comments on those two platforms.
Okay. That's good. What was it? I lost my train of thought.
Oh,
okay. But all right, let's divert. You look good today.
Oh,
You're
thank
in
you.
your
In my Canada Day
Canada Day
outfits.
colors. Canada Day colors.
Yeah.
She's in red and white, and I'm in white. This is all the colors we have today, folks. This
Yeah.
is Canada. You're looking at Canadians in Canada celebrating our birthday weekend.
And I'm going to say thank you, Gary. I did have on a different color, and you said, "Hey, what happened to your Canada Day colors?"
Yeah, so we had to go and
Put
change.
the jacket on.
I had a different color shirt as well, and I had to go and change, right? So thanks for that. Thanks for that.
As I said, Gary, you're not going to be only our producer, you're going to be our host, and you're going to be our makeup.
Makeup!
Yes, the makeup.
Calling the makeup guy.
Wardrobe and makeup.
Anyway, folks, we have a fantastic program that we're going to be airing today. And, we're going to be talking, we've spoken about so many things in regards to health. And today we've decided, you know what, let's look at something really unique, and that is the EMS service. All right.
But guess what? I'm going to stop you right there because we forgot. What was our topic last week? Do you remember? We had a very shitty show.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Something brown.
Crappy. That was really hilarious, but we learned a lot. And we had a lot of folks write in, and that was awesome. And guess what? During the week, we were scheduled to go to a conference out in Windsor, 4-day conference. And folks, I don't know what it is, but after that show,
I think Karma just
is a B, right?
Yeah. Karma came by and said,
ended up, we were getting dressed, suitcase packed,
ready to go into the car, ready to go. And the gastroenteritis, which is apparently something is going around. Yeah. Our neighbors told us that it's
kids are really being affected.
There are a lot of kids are being affected this year with gastroenteritis.
And it could have been a bug brought in by, we're going to blame it on you, Kofi, if you're listening. We're going to blame it on Kofi. But we were out for 2 days. And I just want to give a big shout out to Penny, who came by. Penny Williams. She was one of the first guests on our show. I'm going to call you Dr. Penn, because she came by, and it's, we know what to do with some of the, but I think with what she recommended, some of the probiotics, the good gut bacteria, it was gone in a
little thing. I don't know what it's called. They're like little marbles.
The
very small.
Pebbles.
Yeah. And you put it under your tongue. It's like almost immediately the diarrhea
lots of fluid, and it just went. It went up and down.
But that thing, I'm telling you, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It knocked me out completely, weakened my body for a couple of days. And
needless to say, we did not attend the conference. Anyway, moving on. Back to you.
So back to us again, folks. Once again, welcome to the Liquid Green Health Show. We are the Coxes. You're listening to us on Reality Radio 101, and our topic today is what?
We're going to be talking about paramedics, the EMS services. We're going to look at the US and Canada, why we need this service. I was going to say guys, but it's guys and gals, and how wonderful the service is if you ever need it, and how devastating it is if you need it and you can't get it.
And this is all in keeping with our mission to raise the awareness about, various health related issues, both whether it's, direct or indirect. And as a result, today we have a very special guest joining us on our show today. He is our very own producer. His name is Gary LaBarr, and he will be shedding. We're going to have a conversation. This is not a question and answer thing, right? This is a conversation to shed some light on the significance of those courageous individuals, both men and women, who provide essential care and stabilization where it is needed.
Yeah,
right?
The first responders.
Yeah.
Right.
So with that, without further ado, I'd like to welcome to our show, ladies and gentlemen, our producer, Gary LaBarr.
Yay!
Wow, what a crowd here today. Thank you. No. Thank you for having me on.
Great. Well, I mean, we can't help but have you on, right?
Well, that's true.
Have you on every week.
Thank you.
But anyways, thanks for agreeing to talk with us because, as I say, we usually do, the research, but you have been in the business a long time ago. And I'm sure you're going to tell us that so much have changed, but just tell us, how did you get introduced? Like, you've done so many things. How did you get into that paramedics field and what was it like then? Just tell us about,
Well, when I was in high school, I was actually, during the Vietnam War, I did get drafted, but I didn't have to go because the year I graduated is when they pulled out all the troops totally. So I wanted to do something to help people. My best friend's father and grandfather were firefighters, and that just piqued my interest, and I decided that's what I wanted to do. So when I graduated, I applied to the fire department, and I got accepted, and from there it's history. I ended up going to the fire academy for 2 years before paramedicine. That's just to become a firefighter, and then it just grew from there, and I ended up retiring in 1986 as a captain.
Oh, okay. As a firefighter captain.
A firefighter paramedic captain.
Okay. And I think things are a little bit different now because, what I've learned, Frederick, is that things have changed. Things are, the service you get depends on where you live.
That's right.
So in the States, do you know what it's like? Like, I know, for example, you say you graduated as a paramedic, the rank. As a firefighter, you rise through the ranks, but as an EMS worker, you're basically getting certifications that move you up. Is that correct?
That is correct, and it's ongoing education. That you start off back then. I started off in 1975 as what we call an EMT, which is emergency medical technician. And as the technology and more permissions came to us, we call it scope of practice. When it came more and more, we would have to go back to school, because now we started administering drugs, IVs. We could do sutures in field, stuff like that. So it was an ongoing for 10 years of training consistently. Yeah.
Okay. So from what I understand now is like, you would start with being an EMS. By the way, EMS is what? Emergency medical services.
Yes.
The EMT is the technician.
That's correct.
Who works in that department. But in Canada, I think you're not as highly paid as an EMS person as you would be as a firefighter, because the firefighter is a higher rank, is it?
Yeah, and it's compatible. In the States, it depends upon what city you are in, because it is a civil service government job, and they go by, of course, more population, more responsibility, you get more money. And then more of the rural areas, in the States at least, you would make less money, of course.
And the rural, now, again, another thing, Fred, we were looking, and it says, provincially, our services are covered. The EMS services are covered by province. Those are the ones that set the rules, correct?
Well, in Canada, the services are the responsibility of each Canadian province or territory.
Right.
And they include both ambulance and paramedic services, right? And then it goes down they may be directed by the province, right? That the province rather directly contract a private provider.
Right. So we do have the private providers
and they
here.
have delegated or delegated to a local government, which may in turn create service delivery arrangements and stuff with the municipalities,
Great.
hospitals, or private
Yeah.
providers. And that's basically the breakdown.
Because in the States, again, I think, Gary, correct me if I'm right, you can go to a private, I think some of the statistics I heard is about 25% of EMS services in the US is private. And not just private, but they're owned by big companies who are in it for just the profits.
That's correct. That is correct. There's one, I won't mention, there's one company in the States that is in several states. However, a lot of the initial care on scene is public, where fire departments respond with EMTs. And the only difference is they don't transport. They would wait for an ambulance to transport the patient, but they would stabilize. That is no charge because that's the fire department, the municipality fire departments, and that's covered by taxes, right? Your taxes pay for those services. But there are private entities, and there's one big company down there that that is private. But what happens is people, their insurance pays for it, and if they don't have insurance, like any care in the United States, they can apply for Medicaid, and the government will end up picking up the bill anyhow. So that's like a welfare program down there. So yeah, so you'll never be denied services ever.
You won't be denied, but they have something called the billing. Like once you've had the service, then they send you an unexpected bill. That's
in the private. Well, in the private sector, that's correct. However, as I say, if you can show that you can't afford that, can't pay it, or you don't have the money, you can submit that to the municipality for Medicaid. And what it does is it goes into the taxpayers, and the taxpayers fund pays for that. So
because I was watching a harrowing story.
Don't watch any stories. They're never accurate, believe me.
Accurate. And the lady had an accident on the subway, and she was saying, please don't call the ambulance because she can't afford the bill. She won't be able to afford the bill after. It's going to put her in financial stress. So as you say, there is always another side to the story.
That's correct. I mean, she might not have, in that particular instance, maybe not literally afford it. And I can understand that because a lot of people can't.
Yeah.
But the ambulance services, they'll always get their money. So it's not, so that's the part they don't show you on these documentaries.
And Frederick, you wanted to talk about the differences. For example, I know my aunt used to live in a building, one of the government buildings in Canada, and whenever the elevator broke down, they would automatically
I think what you're trying to talk about there is the service that is provided in Canada, and a lot of times you hear people, self-included, will say, why is it so many vehicles have to
show up?
Why so many different
trivial,
divisions of the service have to show up for something that we may construe to be minor? You have the police, the fire, the ambulance that comes up, and then you have other vehicles there. I don't know what department they're from. Why is that necessary? Gary, if you can tell us that.
Sure. Most likely for every city and every province, the police are usually always involved for legality reasons. And they're there to take a report in case someone wants to sue the building or sue somebody, whatever. So they're on scene usually, if they can, regardless of how minor, to take a report, just to mandate it, to get it into the system. That's number one. Number two, the fire departments usually respond for something like that in case there's an extraction needed, to forcible to get into an elevator, to rescue someone with a rope, a ladder, what have you. What EMS people don't carry that equipment with them. So the fire department would respond. And then, of course, if there is an injury, the EMS people would be there. That's why they do that.
Okay, so that's why you have so many different services.
That's right.
Just to the lay person, it's like, oh my God, like we're an elevator and,
Yeah.
But I think one of the problems with this is I have heard that in Canada, we have days where there is ground zero. There are no ambulances available to send out to somebody in need.
That's correct.
Can you explain
I
how?
can explain.
Yeah.
That's a great question, Janet. The
Mhm.
problem is, number one, the healthcare system in our province is overwhelmed, doctors, nurses, and EMS. The bottom line is it comes down to money. If there were
Yes.
more money available, there'd be more crews, more ambulances, more dispatchers, etc. That's the reason why. So when you have a day where, let's say it's extremely hot and people are passing out in the summer and they're having all kinds of breathing problems or possible heart attacks, what have you, the system's overwhelmed because now instead of 70 calls an hour, they might have 300 calls an hour. We don't have enough, and it's the same in the States. But I can tell you one thing, compared to the state, Canada has an amazing EMS program. The program, I believe, has a lot of better than what the United States has for that particular program because the training is so intense here. And
Okay.
I've looked at some of those programs online and they're amazing. But to answer your question, it comes down to money. Budgets are cut, and one of the first things, unfortunately, they cut is EMS, police, all that stuff. So that's the reason.
Yeah. You mentioned that in Canada it's a much better system compared to the United States. Is it all round in that would include training as well as availability of services, equipment, and stuff like that?
Yes. You know, the United States obviously has 335 million people compared to Canada, about 35 million. So when
We're
you look
California.
yeah, when you look at the amount, and I just want to backtrack for a minute. When I say Canada's EMS program is better, it is to some aspects, and then the United States is better to other aspects. So it's, to me, it's an even deal. But the training here is amazing that the first responders get. But in the States as well, when you get to big cities like Janet was saying, Los Angeles, New York City, Dallas, Texas, what have you, you have millions of people. There's cities in the United States that have more population than the whole province here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, so you have overwhelming calls. You can get 1,000 EMS calls every half hour. 1,000. Think about that. Well, there's not 1,000 crews to respond. So they have to prioritize, and that's the bad thing because it comes down to money. That's what it comes down to.
And
Now-
that also shows that it doesn't matter how much money you have, how much equipment or staff you have, if the calls are overwhelming, you can't match it.
You can't match it, and you have to prioritize. When on my shifts, I always worked overnight shifts 99% of the time. I don't believe in over 10 years there was a shift that I didn't go all night long with no breaks, no rests.
Wow.
It was continuous.
Now, one of the problems that, in looking at this is we talked about it, we started talking about it, is with the hospitals. So for example, the paramedics show up and they're at the hospital, the emergency room is overwhelmed, and guess what? The paramedics don't get offloaded. I don't know if that's a correct
That's
word.
correct. Offloaded,
they're-
correct.
Yeah, they don't get their patients removed. And then the ambulance driver, the paramedic, has to stay with that patient. What they said, it should be about half an hour, reasonable time, half an hour, probably an hour.
Mhm.
But there have been times they've waited 3 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours, I've heard, that an ambulance driver can wait. And in the meantime, that ambulance is tied up with, I've been there to emergency. You've
That's
seen them
correct.
standing around. The patients are on a stretcher, or they're
Waiting.
waiting to be processed.
They look as though they're waiting for a call.
I've been in those situations where my whole shift was just waiting.
Oh
I
my
didn't,
God.
so I would take someone in at 9 a.m.
Mm.
and I wouldn't be leaving until 6 p.m.
That
What?
is,
And that was my whole shift. My whole shift then would be just waiting, because if you don't offload, you're
Mhm.
responsible for the patient. Even though they're on the hospital grounds, you would get assistance. Let's say if it was a heart patient in for whatever reason and they went into cardiac arrest, you're there to work on them, and then they would supply staff to come running to help you. But you're responsible to that patient until it's offloaded and signed off to a hospital.
So
Now-
and that depends, regardless of the condition of the patient, they just have to wait in that ambulance. Am I correct?
Yeah, and not necessarily in the ambulance, but in the facility, but on a gurney, right? Still, a stretcher is a gurney. And, yeah, you're responsible. Now, thank goodness, at least in the States now, and to here to some extent, it's getting better, not for people that go into a hospital and have to wait in a waiting room, but they're getting better of offloading patients and ambulances just to get those ambulances back out in the public. They're just basically transferring them from a gurney to a hospital bed, and they can put that hospital bed in a hallway, in a sanitation locker. They, just to get the patient there, to get the ambulance out of there, and that's what they've been striving for over the last few years.
Okay, because they say it's because the problem starts because they don't have the personnel to do the triage.
That's correct.
Can you explain what triage is?
Triage is basically what happens is when someone first comes into a facility, a quick going over. What's wrong with you? What are your symptoms? What has the treatment been thus far? A history. And that's what they do. And then they prioritize from a triage. Is this a level 1, 2, 3, 4, and people that come in with broken bones and this and that, they could be waiting 10, 12, 15 hours. People that come in with cardiac issues or severe breathing issues, they would take them as a priority. So a triage is just to sum up a patient to see what's wrong with them.
Right. And you have the ABCs.
Yeah, the airway, breathing, and all that you're talking about? Yeah. Yeah, obviously bleeding and, people breathing, people bleeding, those are more prioritized than pain, providing the pain isn't somewhere where they think you're going to have an appendix burst or something, right? If you got pain in your knee, no matter how severe, that's not going to be a major thing for them to bring you in.
Yeah, we had a doctor in Falmouth, and he, no matter what the condition was, he always took the babies first, the pediatrics.
Yeah.
That was first, but that's not necessarily how it should be, right?
Well, not necessarily, but as we know, babies are precious and they can't talk and communicate properly. 99% of the time when a baby's like that, they usually because they're in pain from an ear infection or something of that nature. And they want to do that because a baby obviously can cry very, very hard and for a long time and really disturb a lot of people that are waiting, for other treatments. So they try to do that, but when a baby can't communicate, it's very tough, right? So you want to make sure you try to figure that out pretty quick.
So what would be, sorry, Frederick, I know you want to say something. Okay, go ahead, and then I'll come back.
Okay, I always hear things on the news like response time and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
What's the average response time for the EMS?
That varies in municipalities. In my particular one, we had to be on scene no later than 6 minutes, 6 to 7 minutes. Now I started off in New York City, which is almost an impossibility, and then I ended up in Rochester, New York. So 6-7 minute response. Some say you got to be there in 4 minutes because they put their ambulances when they're not busy in geographic locations. They build the EMS facilities in certain cities. Some cities say 15 minutes. Some say 12. It depends upon where they're located and the population and the traffic flow. So, you know what? The perfect answer for that is get there as quickly as you can, Yeah.
Because that's one of the complaints we get in Canada, right? In
yeah.
Toronto, is that, oh my God, they're supposed to be, we had to wait 7 minutes for an ambulance.
But
Yeah.
I think the average time probably is between 7 to, I don't know, probably 5 to 8 minutes, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it could be longer. Like I know in Toronto, I have friends that are paramedics in Toronto, and they say sometimes they can't get on scene until 12, 15 minutes because of traffic, right?
Yeah. And with all the construction that's going on in Toronto,
Yes.
that's,
And you know what else? It's people that don't know how to drive. They don't know to yield properly. Like there's people at a red light, and if there's an ambulance behind with their sirens going and their lights on, they are legally allowed to blow that red light, providing you treat it like a stop sign, make sure no other traffic's coming. And they're afraid that if they go through the red light and a cop's around, they're going to get a ticket. Well, that's not the case. If you have to go through a red light for EMS, providing you stop and you look and you gain control of the intersection and there's no traffic coming, no cop in his right mind is going to give you a ticket for that.
Right.
Oh, I thought that was just a given that they're supposed to do that. Like they're supposed to.
Well, a lot of people are afraid to do that.
Oh, really?
Well,
Oh,
because it's a red light, they think, well, it's only going to be red for another minute. That ambulance can wait, right? So, yeah.
oh, okay.
You want-
It's funny. I was going to share a personal story that just came to me. I was in Florida and my niece was having a baby and she had gone to check out at the hospital the evening and they told her, oh no, she's fine because she was having some pain. They checked her at the hospital and they told her, no problem. You can go home and you can even go to work tomorrow. Her mom worked in an emergency department at the Veterans Hospital in Florida, one of them. And I was there as a visiting young person. This has got to be about 15 years ago. And guess what? She started in labor. And because the emergency nurse, her mother, she freaked out. I guess that's because she was at home and that was her own daughter. And I became the medic in charge. I became the medic. And I delivered that baby.
Dr. Janet.
We talked.
Good for you.
I have a certificate, folks, that said, and I did that. But guess what? When the ambulance actually came, the police came first. And it took so long, and we had the baby. They didn't want me to cut the cord, so we just had her wrapped up on, on the tummy, on the floor. And oh my God, it was just a disaster. It looked like you'd have believed there a bomb went off.
Emergency room.
But what I remembered is that they went to the wrong address. That
Oh.
took longer.
That happens.
How does that happen? Do you see that?
Well, it happened more then than it would now because everything is automated, digitized, GPS. Back then, no, we had to write things down. If we had to know our districts and where we were working. And if we had an issue, we'd call back to dispatcher and they had everything. They'd relay, make a left on Main Street, 2nd Street on the right is Devon, make a right. But nowadays, that should not happen. Everything is pretty well digitized.
You have the 10.5-inch screen,
Yeah, everything is touch screen in the ambulances now and
Yes.
everything.
Okay, with that, folks, let's go to some email. And here's one from Frank. And Frank said, hello, Coxes. I'm very surprised that you're on the radio today, being that it is a Canadian holiday. But we're glad since there will be 5 of us listening to your show at a barbecue. In fact, one of my guests is a TO police officer.
Okay.
So this show will, in fact, hit home. Thanks for sharing. And thank you for that one, Frank. And
I'm glad that your friend, the police officer, is actually getting a break.
And listening,
because
yes.
These are the times when they're out. I always feel sorry for the cops when it's the holidays and they're working, right?
You gotta work. You gotta be out there. But enjoy the barbecue and thank you for that wonderful email. Here's another.
And if I can say,
yeah,
it's a holiday, but for us, it's important. We don't want to just play something. We could have done that, right? But we enjoy the show and we have the time. And so we really
we could have done a rerun today, folks, but we're here. Here's one from Bob, and Bob is saying, happy Canada Day weekend, Coxes. Great topic today. Here's one from Kelly, and Kelly said, God bless all of the first responders out there. They see it all before the hospital personnel, which is true, and that's something that.
And before you move on to the next one, first responders. Do you remember COVID pandemic? Remember how everybody was given pizzas? I think first responders ate more pizza.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
and burgers
and coffee and drank more coffee than anyone else.
Martin's donuts,
Yeah.
What's the role of the first responder, Gary? We're going to come back to some of the emails because we have quite a few.
Yeah.
But in terms of the pandemic, what is your assessment of what happened? Because some people look at it as fantastic, but guess what? So many of them lost their jobs. So many, and in the States, I hear it's a big problem with so many of the people who are actually first responders. They can't even afford their own health care.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of those things and what you know then and probably how it's changed?
Well, the pandemic, like any pandemic, affects everything of human life, not only health, but finances, jobs, old family, the bottom line is we were, in my opinion, knowing what I know, and I've had quite a bit of medical background in school. The pandemic for COVID's been around for decades.
Yes.
It's nothing new. However, it did affect a lot of people in the world with underlying conditions, and and some people, you just don't know how any type of a major flu or respiratory problem is going to affect you. We don't know. Okay, everybody, you could have nothing wrong with you and you can end up dying from it, but the flu kills millions of people as well a year. I think it was not handled properly. I think the vaccine, my opinion, I originally got 2 shots. And then I thought about it. I looked at the data. I talked to my doctor. She recommended that. And even though I have some cardiac issues, she said, I don't recommend you get it anymore, because originally it was touted that you won't get it. Then it was touted that if you do get it, your symptoms won't be as severe. Then it was touted if you get it, you won't be in the hospital. And then we saw reports of thousands upon thousands of people that meant nothing. Fully vaxxed, still got it. Some people died. Some people ended up in the hospital. I think that was a bad bill of goods sold to us. That's number one. Number two, the masks, no good. Okay, it's been proven that the mist of the virus from sneezing and coughing, the masks that we were told to wear does not stop the penetration. It could maybe stop if someone had a cold or a flu and some of those droplets were a little bit larger and things like of that nature. Yes, perhaps a mask could have helped with some of that. But as far as COVID is concerned, I don't believe the mask did us any good at all. That's my opinion. And I think overall, we did not handle that virus very well at all.
Yeah. And I think I share many of what you just said, the same opinions. I think it was improperly handled. I think a lot of misinformation was given out, and that kind of confused everyone. But with that said, tell us something, Gary, about some of the cons or the disadvantages of being an EMT in the system.
Probably the biggest one is being depressed after seeing, you day after day, year after year. You don't really respond to anybody that's happy. Everything you respond to is something sad, hurtful. Right. I mean, there were times we would respond and, you'd I've saved a lot of lives, but I've also lost a lot of lives. I've delivered babies and I delivered stillborns. I mean, there's things that, and you got to learn to separate that when you come home to your family and all that, not to think about it, because damn well the next shift is the same crap over and over again. And I say crap because it's depressing. The suicides, the murders, and you can't forget that a lot of the responders that respond, especially in New York, we're getting harassed or we're getting shot at, just like the sniper on the roof. And, so that's the con. The good news is the pro is when you do save.
Before you move on, what they say is the rate, it's I read it somewhere, 10% more than the average population is a suicide rate for.
I would say it's higher now.
Yeah.
Okay.
After COVID.
It's not just that, like take into consideration an accident, right? Or a fire, and you see bodies that are being, mangled in these cases. You've seen that over and over, over a period of time. That definitely will have
desensitized, right?
And if you don't get desensitized, you get, there's a traumatic breakdown, right?
You do to some extent for the minor stuff, but I don't think for humans, it's not in our human interest in the way that we're brought up and the way our mindset is, that you ever just get totally desensitized seeing someone decapitated or a suicide or someone burn over 90% of their body. You don't get over that, and I got to admit, I was one of the lucky ones that was able to handle a lot of that. And that's why I rose through the ranks, because I had to mentor a lot of younger paramedics and firefighters. And a lot of guys quit. A lot of women quit after 6 months, year and a half. They couldn't take it anymore.
How about things like non-urgent calls? How often is that, that you have to respond to?
Well, we do. I'll give you one funny instance. You remember the old adage you used to see when firefighters would respond to cat in a tree? Remember all that?
Mhm.
You know,
There's
Yeah, yeah.
right?
and I responded one time. A lady was in dire straits, upset. Her cat was up in a tree for hours, and she was crying and everything else. And we responded because the initial report was that something was hanging from an electrical wire.
Oh,
So people lie because they want you there faster, right? So
Okay.
we get there and there's nobody or nothing hanging from electrical wire, and the lady is very, very upset. And I'll never forget what we said to her. She said, my cat's been up in the tree for hours and it's going to die up there. And we said, look, lady, here's the deal. Put some food down at the bottom of the tree. And the cat's hungry. The cat will come down. And she looked at us, and I'll never forget this. She said, are you sure that's going to work? And I looked at her and we said, lady, did you ever see a dead cat in a tree before? And that was it. We left. And
But
so you get things like that, ridiculous non-issues that we shouldn't even be involved with,
Mhm.
because it ties up resources for people that really need us, right?
in a case like that, who pays for the service?
You
The
don't get
taxpayers.
The
taxpayers.
taxpayers.
Yeah.
In
I mean, the individual.
the private, this
That's
is
like a
what,
prank call.
what I understand why some of the rates are so expensive, like now in the States, with some of the private people, the private services,
Yeah.
if they don't actually deliver a patient to the hospital, they don't get paid for that transaction, for lack of a better word.
Is that true?
To some extent, yes, but a lot of no. I mean, they still would get a response fee,
Mhm.
and again, if you can't afford that, it would come out of the taxpayers' money. But the one thing that's an interesting thing that Janet brought up, the bottom line is, especially here, we don't have enough doctors in this province. In the United States, it's a little different. There are plenty of doctors compared to here because of the population. But the bottom line is, people call EMS for everything now because they don't want to, they don't have a doctor, and they don't have a ride, and they stub their toe, and by law, if they call EMS here, we have to respond, right? So a lot of people use EMS as a way to get medical help, because paramedics here, depending upon the level you are, can treat on the scene without transporting. So they are allowed to issue things, medication and stuff like that. And a lot of times it's what they call a no transport. So, it's being abused, but it's abused all around the world, right? So, you
So
know,
this is a great point, Gary. What are some of the things that legitimately a paramedic can look at? Some of the injuries.
well, anything you mean without transporting, or just
No,
everything?
the serious things that will get somebody to the hospital. So I know they do, like if you have asthma or if you
Yeah,
have
anything. That's
or what
correct.
are some of those things?
Anything pulmonary or cardiac,
Mm-hmm.
anything non-responsive, an epileptic, a diabetic, coma, severe pain. But we're allowed to administer pain meds as well. But anything like that, anything that could be a natal response for childbirth, any severe bleeding, that type of thing, would be a medical emergency to transport, for sure.
In the same vein, are they allowed to do any kind of emergency treatment while on the way to hospital?
Yes, quite a bit. Depending upon what level you are of a paramedic, there's, I believe, 3 in Canada, plus advanced life support. Yes, they would treat. You're trained. You're basically a field doctor, because
Okay.
because when I got my advanced paramedicine license, I spent 6 months in an ER. 6 months you have to work in the States in an emergency room in a hospital. So yes, we treat, we administer drugs, treatment, to stabilize a patient, to get them to the hospital, then where they get further treatment. Yes, your mic is muted, by the way. There you
Yes,
go.
sorry about that. And what about the qualifications? What level.
To become a EMS, right?
Yeah.
Usually the minimum, I'm not sure what it is in Canada. I think it's the same. The minimum is 2 years of a program, and then it goes up from there, depending upon the level of paramedicine as a paramedic. When you start to get into a cardiac or advanced, it's more than that. But I think the minimum to be what we call a primary care paramedic, which is basically advanced first aid, they can administer oxygen, they can administer drugs to reverse other drugs, things like that. I think that's a 2-year program here.
I think I think they have to go
You have to
through.
go to college.
In the States, you don't have to go to college, right?
No, you do. You do now. I mean, some you don't. Some municipalities around you don't, but it's a school. Like it's a school or a college, whatever you want to call it.
Because here most of the
The
colleges
community
here
colleges
will offer the program. Right?
Yeah, and you're correct. And I think it's a 2-year program or so for primary care.
And I think what happens a lot of times is somebody will go into one of these jobs. If it's like a stepping stone into
careers.
the police or
Yes.
the fire or the nursing or even probably doctor. Did you have friends who did that? Like you moved?
I do. We have a program that just started here in Canada 4 to 5 years ago. It's called the Physician's Assistant Program.
The what?
Physician's Assistant.
Okay.
And they just started that in Canada here about 4 or 5 years ago. And what that is, because there's not enough doctors, and doctors have to go to school between 8 and 10 years, especially for a specialty. A physician's assistant program is 4 years, and you can do everything a doctor can do, every single thing. You can open your own practice, you can work everything, but you have to work under another doctor's license as well. So you are allowed to diagnose, to write prescriptions, to do procedures, and they're getting more and more physicians' assistants in clinics and hospitals to help with other doctors. And it would be considered like a nurse practitioner, where they can write. Nurse practitioners can have their own practice. They can write prescriptions, everything else.
Yes.
So a lot of paramedics go on to that. They don't have the time or the money or the inclination to become a doctor full blown, but they become a physician's assistant, which is a great career as well. That's a stepping stone.
Which is wonderful because in the rural areas,
Yeah.
even in a country like Canada, which has free healthcare, etc., the lack of doctors who want to go to those areas. You
don't have enough doctors.
You don't have enough, and depending on the pay, you're going to get more pay in a bigger city than in an area.
Yeah.
I hear they're like small towns, 11,000 people. I was listening to something on CBC just a few days ago, and they had like 6 doctors, 1 clinic, and they had like 8 doctors and 5 of them left. So there were 3 doctors in like an area of 11,000 people with and they're overworked. They're,
and the reason they left is not enough pay.
The pay and being
overworked.
Overworked.
Is a perfect example is before I immigrated here to Canada, my primary care physician in New York was from Ontario, and he left to come down there to practice.
Because of higher pay scale?
Way higher.
Much higher. Now we touched on some of the cons, like
Sorry, go ahead.
We talked about non-urgency calls. We talked about decrease in quality of sleep, that kind of stuff, that affected an EMT. What are some of the pros of becoming an EMT?
Oh, yeah.
Well, first of all, if you believe in this, which I do, it's a rewarding job. You're helping your fellow man. That's number one. And of course, when you do bring someone back from, say, a cardiac event or, a suicide, and you talk them out of it or this or that, those are the pros where you're helping people, because no matter what anyone will ever tell you, everybody is going through something. And the bottom line is that's the pros. Second of all, the pay is very good at that time. Obviously, it's much better now. I am living on my retirement is really nice. I have a retirement right now from the fire department. The benefits were really good. And it's also a union protected job. To lose your job, you really got to be a screw up. But otherwise, you do get some protection from the union, which was good. But overall, it's helping people. I think that's the bottom line: is you're saving lives and you're helping people to become a better person, perhaps.
Great.
But and if you don't like this job, chances are if you get in, you're going to find out pretty quickly that
I
this
would
is
say,
not for
yes,
me.
Janet. You know where we lose a lot of people is when they're taking their field training in the emergency department.
Mhm.
That's where, when you got to work there for 40 hours a week, for months, and you're on a shift there because you see it all there. But then when you get out in the field, it's worse because that's the first grab at them.
Mhm.
At least a lot of times when they come in, they're stabilized or patched up a little bit by the time you get them in ED. But
Yeah.
when you're out in the field, you got it all. So, yeah.
It's also a good career for diversification and
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
there's
Yep.
lots of other paths you can take.
I'm sorry. My partner for many years actually was from South Africa. Great guy. He was a much better paramedic than I was, but he really got into it. I did my job, but I was also, as I say, in the fire service, so I had to concentrate a lot on that stuff too.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, it is great for diversity for sure.
Okay, we have quite a few emails. If
Yeah,
you
let's
want to
go
go
through
through,
some,
let's run
yeah.
through this quickly. You want to take that one?
Okay, Jane says, hey to the Coxes, the first responders have to work today. Their jobs are never done. Lots of drinkers on the roads. I wonder, do you think? I'm just kidding.
That's the
And
reason
lots
why
of
they have to be out there,
MVA,
right? That's
the motor vehicle accidents.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
that's yeah,
Here's
absolutely.
one from Monica, and she says, hey to Janet and Fred, I hope that I do not need an EMS today after eating this. And she sent us a picture of barbecued chicken wings on our picnic, right? Here's another one from Don, and he says, Janet and Fred, hello, and producer Gary, wow, who knew? You so cool, man. Love you folks.
Okay.
Right. And going on to Brenda, she says, hey to the Coxes, thanks for doing this show today. Folks, you do not realize how much education and training these folks have to go through. They are the true heroes of life. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you.
And Karen says, hello, Liquid Green Show. Happy Canada Day. Thank you. Love your show always. And here's hoping you never need EMS. And you know what? I've never been in an ambulance, I've never needed to be in an ambulance. Have you?
No, never.
What about when you're in Guyana and you had that?
No, when I had that injury, we were on the move. Unfortunately for me, another military vehicle was behind us, and that took me to the hospital.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the military, they have their own. Oh, wow. Right.
Yeah.
Gary, another story. I forget what I was going to say.
Okay, while you're
Go
thinking
ahead.
about that, I'll read another email. Here's one from Glenn. Cox's amazing show today. You have opened up the eyes of lots of us. Thanks for sharing this information. Jody says, happy Canada Day. Happy Canada Day weekend, Cox's. Enjoy this topic today. We never think about this. It is refreshing to hear about this subject. Take care, and we will.
And that's what we like to do, bring, we like to bring topics that are not the usual. Like last week's topic, how many people really talk about defecation, right?
Not a lot.
And I remember what I was going to say. Gary, I was going to share this with you. When my dad died, again, this was in Jamaica, it was about 11 o'clock at night. And the hospital, the Falmouth Hospital, which used to have a morgue, did not have a morgue. And my mom and myself and my sister, Jean, we were there, and we got a call from the hospital, and he says, this was 11 o'clock at night, could you come and pick up Mr. Bennett? He has passed. And there we are wondering, how do we, we're not in Canada, she lives in France. You can just imagine how we were like, what? How could this happen, right?
Where are we going to put him?
We ran out to the street, and guess what? Believe me, this is not a fabricated story. There was an ambulance coming down from wherever late at night. We just ran out, and there was an ambulance, small town, coming down the street, and we stopped him. And he says, okay, I'll go pick him up for you.
Oh,
And then
wow.
we went with him, but of course, we went with him down to the hospital. They
Mhm.
actually, we didn't stay, but the ambulance then picked him up, and then they phoned and got a funeral home
Mhm.
open, and then
at that time.
at that time, and that's how it was taken care of. So it's amazing what the EMS services can do
They're
Wow.
always
in
there.
different parts of the world.
They're always
Wow.
there. Here's another email from Karen, and she says, while we're enjoying our holidays, these folks are out working and saving lives, sometimes even putting their lives at risk. Bless them.
Yeah.
Right?
I wonder what's the injury rate, Gary, for EMS?
It's pretty high. I've had even minor for me. I've had as a firefighter combination. I've broken bones. I've had stitches over 25 times, cut from glass, burns. I have scars on my body. Yeah, it's pretty high.
Yeah.
What do you think? Sorry, go ahead.
Apart from the injury rate, what's the what's the term for that when people call in sick? The sick leave.
It's high mentally more than physically. Mentally, people need, I used to work 4 days on, 3 days off, 4 nights on, 3 days, it's different shift work, and that screws up, as you know, your internal clock. But a lot of people after 2-3 weeks, if they have a really bad month, I can't come in today for whatever reason. And it's more mental stress. That's all.
And I have one last question. I mean, we can talk about this for another 2 hours because there's so much more. But this is just an interest question for me.
Sure.
A cop, a policeman,
Mm-hmm.
firefighter, and a paramedic. Which is the most dangerous of those 3 jobs?
You can leave the paramedic out. It would be between the police. Back in the day, it was firefighters, definitely. Nowadays, I'd have to say the police. They're pulling over people for traffic stops and things like that and getting shot and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So
It's
I would have to say the police.
It's a more direct danger that they face.
Yeah.
So that's a question I'm going to throw out to the thousands of people that we have listening to us today on this very happy Canadian long weekend. Go to our Facebook and answer that question. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of, have you had any personal experiences using, good or bad, using the EMS service, either here in Canada, in the US? And we'd love to hear from the few folks that are listening globally. Yeah. Right? So what are the handles, Frederick? And Gary, at this point, Frederick is going to thank you and he's going to give out the
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it very much.
You're telling me to thank Gary?
Yes. Yes.
I cannot thank Gary enough because
Fred, you guys both thank me every week, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been wonderful interaction. Yeah. And as you briefly alluded to, this is just an opening of the type of programs that we would like to, bring on a regular basis. Yeah. We at some point in time would like to have someone that is
a police or
like a what's the phrase I'm looking for? Like a firefighter, a firefighter or an actual EMS person who's in the field. Right, that can throw a lot more light on the system. How
you mean
works.
No? Because Gary was in the field.
I'm talking about currently
active. That they're still active.
Yeah, someone that's currently in the field. Okay, that can elaborate on some of the things that we've been talking about, because it's a very important topic.
I would love to get a doctor from the emergency room. Oh, wow. I think that's got to be probably one of the biggest stress jobs in the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The stress level in these professions are very, 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 very high. And,
and with that, you have
the turnover rate. That's a question we didn't ask, Gary. The turnover rate in this, how high is it?
It's pretty high. Right. It is pretty high.
So I can imagine. So with that, folks.
Sorry we didn't get through all the emails, but and we always answer them. If we don't read them on air, we definitely answer them during the week.
And Gary, I would like to say thank you. Thanks for taking the opportunity to come on the show and to give us the insight as to what really happens behind the scenes. A lot of things, we take for granted, we don't know, but you were able to shed some light on.
Also want to say thanks to Mike, because Mike, I remember when we first thought about this, and you said, "Oh, absolutely, you got to talk to Gary." He has
We don't care about Mike. Don't worry about him.
Oh, thank you.
So, Mike, you good choice, right?
I appreciate that. Yeah, I thought it was a really good idea.
I appreciate it too, Coxes. I love you guys. I think you have a great show, and I was honored to be on your show, and I mean that from my heart.
Thank you very much. And with that show, folks, that has brought us to the end of this 1 hour conversation. Unfortunately, we have to leave, but I hope that you have enjoyed the show. I hope that what we've said today has shown, enlightened you a little bit more as to what happens behind the scene in the EMS service. And so with that, I would say good health is central to human happiness and well-being. It contributes significantly to prosperity and wealth and even economic progress. And as healthy individuals, we can be more productive and even live a little bit longer. So until next Sunday, same time, same location. This is Janet and Fred saying, let's stay healthy.
And happy Canada Day.
And
again,
happy 2/4. Happy,
great.
Happy July 4th to our neighbors to the south.
Yes.
Thank you. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you for listening to the Liquid Green Health Show with your hosts, Fred and Janet Cox, right here on Reality Radio 101.